So now we're going to go into some basics of what's called non-destructive editing versus destructive editing. And we're going to do some simple adjustment layers here. We're basically going to take this image and I'm going to show you a bunch of different ways to go about making this a black and white image. And I'll show you some good ways and some bad ways, and I'll show you the best way. So with our image here, make sure again, so if it doesn't look like this, make sure you're in Essentials. But whether you have color or swatches showing, you should be able to see your layers here. Now, before I can do anything with this, right, you'll see that you're going to get a message that says the current layer is the background layer. You basically can't move it. You can't really do much with it. So convert to normal layer will prompt you here. You could click yes there, but just go ahead and hit cancel. And again, so I hit V, I was trying to move it, and it's telling me I can't do anything with it. So we can see down here in layers, we see background. Now you could do a couple different things. You could just click on the lock there, and that would unlock it as a layer. I'm going to Command Z and go back. You could double click it, and that'll create a new layer, one that you can name. So we can name this trumpet. Hit OK, and then we see that changes there too. So basically we want to unlock that layer so I can now click and I could do stuff with it now here, right? Okay. So first, this is a really bad way to go about making this a black and white image, but let's just say we wanted to make this a black and white image, and the first way you could do it here is you could come up to Image, you could go to Mode, and you could go to Grayscale. And this is a really bad way to do this because this is destructive editing. What this is going to do is this is going to take all of that color information and basically just throws it out. And once it's done that, you can't really do much more to the adjustment layers here. So we'll just hit discard, and we'll see. So that gives us what we want. It gives us a black and white image, but we didn't really have any control in how we wanted to adjust any of those finer settings, like with contrast or balance or exposure. We really couldn't do anything. We just had a simple one-click destructive editing process that gave us a black and white image here. So that's option one. Go ahead and hit Command Z. And again, there's a lot of different ways to do this, and right, I'm just showing you them so you can see how Photoshop can really operate as on many different levels with many different functions, and they all have their own different approaches. But another way that you could do this that would be a better way, but maybe not the best way, is we could add an adjustment layer. Now there's a lot of different ways to do this too. So across the top, you could come up here to Layer, or I'm sorry, Image. Yeah, come up to the top here to Layer, and then down to New Adjustment Layer. And we have all of these different adjustments we can make to the image, right? You could do the same thing by coming down to the bottom here, this little icon here, this little half circle with the square, create new fill or adjustment layer. If we click on that, that gives us that same menu that we just had access to at the top, right? All these different layer or adjustment layers we can make to the image. And lastly, you could come up here to Adjustments, and now they're all in an icon format, right? So for those of you that are a bit more visual, these are the same things: brightness, contrast, exposure, vibrance, hue, saturation. You could see when you click down here, same thing: vibrance, hue, saturation, and whatnot. So what you could do here is you could do a hue saturation layer. So let's click that, and you'll see what it does is it puts a adjustment layer above the image, right? And we haven't done anything with it yet, but now we have the properties here. We could take the saturation and drag that all the way to the left. That essentially is removing all of the color. We're desaturating the image so we get black and white. And then you have a little bit of control with brightness and lightness here. You could make some adjustments here. Right? So this is a better way And this is what's called non-destructive, because if we want to turn this off, we can just click the eye right here at any time just to see the original image. So all of the color information is still there. And then if we're really not happy with that adjustment layer, we can always just make sure that layer is selected, and then you could just delete. And that takes care of that. Okay. Another way that's a non-destructive way that gives you a bit more control is we could use a gradient map, right? Now, this is a little bit unnecessary, but again, I'm showing you how these can give you more and more control. But first, make sure your foreground and background are on their default black and white right here. So black would be in the front, white would be in the back. If it's never not the case, you could just press D. Right, so I can see here, let's go ahead and I'll change this color to a red. And hit OK. And then I'll change my background color, I don't know, to a green. So if you ever just need them to get back to default black and white, D, boom, does it for you right there. And then we'll come over to our adjustment layer. So create a new filler adjustment layer. Click on that, and then here we have gradient map, and click on that. Okay. And then here, if we double click on this, this will give us a window, a gradient editor, where we can adjust our highs and our lows. And I'll introduce the histogram a little bit later. I'd more like to get you adjusting these on your own with your eye, but a histogram would show you kind of the distribution of the darks and the mids and the lights. But here this gives you a bit more control. And again, so this is, once we hit OK, again, this is non-destructive, so we could always see what this looks like on or off. And let's go ahead and make sure that's selected, and then delete that. Okay, so another method, this one is quite good here, is we could do a channel mixer. So if you go to your adjustment layers again, or here, let's access it from a different place now. So here's adjustments, and we can see all these different adjustment layers. But here is channel mixer, the one that has these 3 circles, but it's the same channel mixer as here. And then the same channel mixer, if you come up to adjustment, new adjustment layers, it's the same thing here. So let's click on that, channel mixer. We can name that. Okay. So what this does is this allows you to control the red, the green, and the blue at your discretion here. So remember, RGB is how this image is being displayed. So if you click on the information, the icon right here, this will show you that wherever you go, remember we had 256 tones of red, 256 tones of green, 256 tones of blue. And wherever I put my cursor, we can see those numbers changing. You can see the distribution of those numbers. So the channel mixer will allow you to select the red, the green, and the blue and tweak those individually. But what we have to do first is we want to make sure this goes to, let me close this, make sure this goes to monochrome. That's going to make it monochrome, hiding the color from us, but Photoshop still recognizes and still knows what colors are where. But now if we do this, but if I come up here, I can click on the red, and if we look at our image, well, way too much, but basically it's only changing the red. If we click on the green, it's only going to change the green tones. And if I click on blue, it's only going to change the blue tones. And on top of that, I can control the contrast as well. So quite a bit of control, but this can be a little bit tricky to get down. But as far as making a black and white image with a nice full tonal range, and by that I mean an image that has dark blacks and medium grays and really light whites, a full tonal range, right? You could have a lot of control using the channel mixer like so. Now again, non-destructive, so I can turn this off at any point. I can turn it back on. I can delete it. But this would be a better way to go about making a black and white image. Okay? So let's go ahead and make sure the channel mixer layer is selected, and we'll just delete that there. Okay. Now, there's a couple other ways to do this, but I'm just going to go right into the best way to do this. So for example, I could use 2 hue and saturation layers, but you know, I'm just going to go right into what the actual layer would be is black and white. So black and white adjustment layer. This is going to be the best method here. It gives you the most amount of control, and you'll see here why that is. So if you click on black and white, this will add a black and white adjustment layer. Now this is similar to the channel mixer, but here we have more control. Here we can control our red, our green, and our blue, but we can also control the yellow, the cyan, and the magenta, right? And there's a nice little feature here. You see this little finger with the little arrows next to it? If you click that on, basically that'll let me come into the photograph itself, and wherever I click, here I'll click here and I'll just move to the right. So there it identified that the spot I was clicking was a yellow hue. So I can adjust kind of on the fly by actually clicking on an element in the photo, right? And I can lighten or darken the light hues there. So if I click on the ship mast here, all of the hues that are the same there will brighten as I move to the right, and they will darken as I move to the left, right? So let's click on this. Let's say I wanted to make this fan a bit darker, a bit blacker. So here I can click on the fan, and now if I slide to the left, I'll see, so it's picking out a value there on top of the, right here. Moving to the right. Let's see, let's click on this part here. Okay, so there we're getting a little bit darker with that fan there. So here, you can play around with this, and again, you don't have to do it that way. You could just come up here and adjust these sliders without clicking on the image, of course. So you could make adjustments here, and this will give you the most amount of control. Like in all of the non-destructive techniques for a black and white conversion, this would be my recommendation, although it does take a bit more time and a bit more control. So it just kind of depends on what you need to do. If it's just a quick and dirty fix, you could just go into the hue saturation layer. Again, so I'll just recap there. So adjustments, hue saturation, and you could just take the saturation all the way down and then adjust the lightness if you just needed a quick black and white. But if you have the time to spend and you want to really make sure everything is looking nice and fleshed out with the full tonal range, then adjustments, and then here I'll show you that. Where is that symbol here? Black and white right here. Select that, and then here you can adjust each of those hues independently. Okay, so that is non-destructive editing to create a black and white version of your photograph. In the exercise that we're going to be doing for the week, I have those 3 images. I have the mannequin, the red and yellow still life, and the black and black still life. Your job will be to create black and white versions of those using any non-destructive editing technique that you'd like. I'd also like you to resize that image, and then you'll submit those to me as PDFs. Or I'm sorry, not PDFs. You'll submit those to me as PSDs, as Photoshop files, and there'll be instructions, written instructions for you to follow as well too. So that is how we do non-destructive black and white editing.